Ahojte, vítam vás na našej ďalšej prednáške. Teraz sa opäť budeme venovať hernej téme, a to jednej z tých najzaujímavejších, a to sú lokalizácie. Keďže aj na sektore často čítame o tom, že prečo tie slovenské hry nemajú lokalizáciu, zistíte, že proste lokalizovať hru nie je úplne jednoduché. Porozprávam o tom Anton Mukhataev, čo je skúsený vývojár, aktuálne pracujúci v Nine Rocks Games, kde pracuje na Way of the Hunter. Ale táto prednáška bude v angličtine, takže they are all yours.
Najprv chcel by som povedať, že už bývam druhý rok na Slovensku, ale bohužiaľ ešte nerozprávam dosť dobre, aby prednáška bolo po slovensky, preto prepačte, bude po anglicky. No, so everyone, thank you for coming. This is not an event where I would expect like people to attend a lecture about video game localization, to be honest, so I really appreciate all of you coming. And I should say first that who I am. My name is Anton. I work at a studio called Nine Rocks Games, and I'm a game designer there. And we are making a game called Way of the Hunter. We already have the main game for DLCs. This is one of the nicest screenshots that our community has submitted for one of the competitions we have. And in general, we have a really nice community. We enjoy interacting with people a lot. And it is all thanks to the game being available in 16 languages. It's quite a lot. It was hard to manage. And you know what? This year, there was one additional language added to the game, and it was Brazilian Portuguese. But the thing is that it wasn't an official translation, it was a fan translation. And you know what? If you've ever interacted with the Brazilian gaming community, if they want something, they will make sure you know that they want it. So what happened? Well, what happened was that we were bombarded with messages for 2 years when you're going to add Brazilian Portuguese language to the game. When is it going to happen? Why is it not happening? You promised us and you didn't deliver. So yeah, it was a tough job, and we kind of felt really bad about it, mostly because we didn't expect there to be such a huge fan base for hunting game, and also it was just bad decision making on our part. But there is a reason why we couldn't do it. So we gave an official answer that sounded like we are currently exploring potential avenues. But the actual answer was we screwed up. The thing is, when you develop video games, what happens is that you are not really concerned with translations, you are concerned with stuff like this. Unfortunately, the FPS now is quite low, but you can see this animal poorly managing because its skeleton is not set up correctly, so it's like a zombie. And this is what you deal with. You usually deal with translations much later when you already have done most of the work. And once you are at this stage, you just really want to get it all done, finish the game, release it, and forget about it for at least quite a while. And we had a lot of languages, so we often just simply hard-coded stuff. We didn't follow good practices. And what happened was that when we wanted to add a new language, it was just extremely hard because for my job, I do a lot of stuff at the company. Only 5% of it is localization. And because of it, what generally happens, for example, is if we didn't consider that the Arabic language is going to be in the game. So what happens is that when you initially make some UI choices, what happens is that your UI is not prepared for it. What you see is just the kind of report we would receive from people who know Arabic, simply saying your game doesn't appear right to the people who would play in this language, so please fix it. And we could fix some stuff, but some stuff would be just too tough. We would have to rework a lot of the systems to make it work. So we kind of made some amends, but not enough. And with Brazilian Portuguese, it would be much worse because it would be a completely different language. We it would be basically like me spending a week or two trying to do it, then figuring out that a lot of stuff still doesn't work. So we failed our community in Brazil, but they didn't fail themselves. They translated the game themselves. I'm like, every time it happens, I'm simply at loss of words. When it happens, it's amazing. So yeah, problem number one with translations and why they are broken. Developers don't care about translation until it is too late. And we learned hard way. Now that we have new DLCs out, we completely changed our workflow. So now it can accommodate for the new stuff, for fixes. We do a lot of things, and I will describe at least some of them briefly. So first, we now realize that when you draw up a pipeline for your whole game, localization should be a part of it, and you should do it really, really early. And if you don't do it early, you will eventually find out that there is a problem. Second, what is also important is that all your text should include some kind of alterations if your game is gendered, meaning that the player can be male or female or transgender, for example, or if you have some kind of numerals that can vary. For example, like in Slovak, you would use a different type of noun based if it is 1, 2, or 5 of something. The form of the noun will change, and this is what happens with like not most, but at least, I believe with Slavic languages at least. So next thing is that you should find ways to limit characters and avoid repetition. What does it mean? It means that first, when you define some kind of limits for each chunk of text in your game, you make sure that it appears right every time, because we often have this issue that whenever the game is translated from English into some other language, it just doesn't appear right. The text would be too long, and it is simply because we didn't define very early how many characters there should be in this particular chunk of text. And regarding repetition, this is one, this issue is one of the reasons why we couldn't implement a new language quickly enough, simply because avoiding repetition is not something we really concerned ourselves with. We had lots of texts that were very similar. We didn't find a way to optimize it, so we had more stuff to translate than we needed, and we also had, to be honest, just like some lazy work where we would add some kind of a key, and for translation that would not be needed, we could just reuse all translation, but we didn't do it. So what happens is that you make a lot of stuff, then you start reassigning those keys, and eventually you find out that you don't really know and understand the whole structure of how your database works. So yeah, this is a huge one. Next, consider all possible languages in advance. So what we do now is whenever we are designing a new UI and or making a new game, what we would do is simply consider all possible languages that can be used in our game. So for example, if we think it could be Arabic, it is nice to adapt to a language that is right to left. If we know that we are going to have Chinese and Japanese, we probably will, we should make sure that the font that we select looks good and it's actually readable, because in both Chinese and Japanese, if the characters are too small, native speakers would even have sometimes issues making it out. Like for example, for Slovaks, Czechs, I believe it is not that difficult to still figure out if they don't see a diacritic, but in some other languages it can mean a lot. So yeah, this is how it works. Now, what is important is that you would actually load lots of texts in your game as early as possible and just test it, see where it breaks. If you do it in advance, there is a higher possibility that is actually going to, you will find issues early, fix them early, and then you will thank yourself later when you find out that you have figured out everything in advance. Now, also, writing notes for translators is probably one thing that is most important. You know why? Because translators are people who complain the least possible whenever they receive something to translate, and often the quality of what they receive is really poor. They just receive chunks of texts that don't have any context. It can mean literally anything, and we still fail at it sometimes, to be honest. Just like we had a recent update where we added character selection. And like there was one character named April. So like in almost all languages she was named April. In French she was Avril, but it was alright, it was consistent with the like main game. But then in Czech she was named, how do you think? Anyone? Any ideas? Duben. So yeah, April was Duben in the Czech version. Yeah, and we just didn't realize it was an issue until it was too late, it was in the game already. It still sometimes happens, and yeah. Fortunately less, because now we provide lots of context. We actually make sure that translators do realize what they are translating, because sometimes they would receive stuff like a verb mount. It can mean literally anything without the context. So yeah, it makes sense to provide these notes, and the most importantly, write them early. Like the minute you put some kind of a text in the game, write a small note, because when you are finishing the game, when you are wrapping up, you don't have the time to make those notes. Do them in advance, thank yourself later. And yeah, some important things about the notes is explain your jokes. When you make jokes in the game, people will often not get them. One of the most popular types of comments we receive from translators is it a joke? Like, is it meant to be a joke? Is it a reference? So it helps when you actually say, look, this is a reference to this movie, for this video game, for this something else. If you make a joke, yeah, I know explaining jokes doesn't sound good, but it helps a lot. It just saves people time. Because you know what? Translators would usually actually have like hundreds of questions potentially, but they can only realistically ask 3 or 4. So they will ask the most important stuff, and they will not complain about everything else. So now, when it comes to translators, there is a huge problem in this industry, and it is simply that there is always someone willing to do it cheaper. Currently, the translation industry is mostly divided into 2 parts. There are companies and individuals. So those huge localization agencies, they provide these services for like the cheapest buck possible, and often you'll just find that, like, yeah, they offer good services. They have many languages. They have they basically manage everything for you, because if you work with individual translators, you will probably have to hire a localization manager that would do it for you, or somebody on your team would have to manage these translations, and it would mean that this person will not work on something else in the game. So yeah, I mean, they somehow help, but at the same time, working conditions there are poor. Like, I've never met a single person who enjoyed working at a localization agency. It's like a bloodbath there. And people like usually have no career opportunities there at all. They don't grow, and like eventually they probably just either be okay with it or leave. And yeah, it is often the question of a lower quality simply because they have tough deadlines, they are paid less. So what you get instead with individuals is that you would have higher quality and direct content, meaning that you can actually interact better and directly with those translators. You can, if you have something custom set up in your game, you can also use it like as an advantage. And yes, they will cost more, but probably they will also save you more time. So if you have an opportunity to hire individuals and then manage them, this is what I would suggest you do. Now, and the consequences of it, of course, will be like more expenses, more management, and so on and so on. But I believe in the end it helps. Now, translators are treated poorly, and especially in those bigger companies. And you know what? There is actually a solution. Like, we cannot persuade those companies to pay more, but maybe if we are more open about it, maybe we talk about it more, it will actually help, because the industry used to have this problem with crunch where people overworked a lot. Then people start talking about it openly, and suddenly it's less of a problem, you know? It helps. So maybe it will help too when we are sort of just telling people to do it. And yeah, hiring individuals directly is important. But if you cannot, you can still find ways to integrate translators. So just like message this company, tell them I want like a more direct contact, and maybe they will agree, like often they will. And it is perfectly fine to to integrate them into your workflow. One important part is that you should prepare specific documentation for them that explains what you are sending to them, and also treat them nicely, treat them like people, you know, because translators are also writers. They are a part of your team and they should be treated well, no matter what. So yeah. Finally, I would also say that you should make sure they are all credited. Often they are missing from credits for certain languages. For example, those companies may not share all those credits, or you may simply forget. So just check it, because for them, having a credit on your game may actually be like a huge career opportunity in the future. Now, yeah, and also speak out. But like there is one huge elephant in the room that I want to talk about. Of course, it is so-called general models, also known as AI, which is it actually not. And I would encourage you to read this very nice, very scientific-looking paper with a really nice title, ChatGPT is bullshit. So, and like, what does it mean? Like, if I give you a gist, it means that ChatGPT is not just hallucinating, like all language models. What they do is that they are trying to make a good impression. And because of it, they are poor for translation work. They just are not as good as actually like reasonable person who is good at like both languages they're translating from and translating to, and knows what they are doing. And the thing is with AI that like recently I received, like I learned a new Slovak word, tremista, but I didn't know what a good translation would be to some of the languages that I know. So I decided, let's look it up. And the answer was Trumpist. So yeah, this happens a lot. And what I would suggest you do is like never trust these tools, always double check them, and also make sure that you realize what they're good at. Sometimes like they can be helpful, but usually they are not. And like the most important thing here is that those tools, they sort of take out the meaning behind the translation, because translation is not just getting some words from the original language and translating each one literally word by word. This is not how it works. You should translate intent, and the issue with language models is that often they just cannot do it at all. They do not translate intent, even like when you give them a lot of context. And the good thing about translators is that, that they sometimes do bullshit you, but they want to do a good job, because like they are paid so little that like any person who continues to pursue it, they actually care about this job. I honestly believe this. So yeah, and they will translate intent if you actually give them the intent in your notes. I truly believe it. Yeah, so this is the problem number 3. Translations will gradually become worse, and we won't notice, because all those companies, what they are currently doing, they are implementing language models in their processes. And the way language models are structured is essentially they will always think there is like the best translation for a specific combination of words, even given a context. And because of it, what actually happens is that we normalize and we pretend that there is a one right translation, but it is not true. Actually the number of good translations can be limitless as long as we take the intent into the account. That's the most important part. So yeah, is there a solution? To be honest, I'm quite depressed about it, and I don't really believe that, because I think unless it crashes for some reason, it is going to be implemented, but there is a hope. I believe it. And this is the power of humans being annoyed and complaining a lot. Because you see, we are usually reprimanded for complaining, but I believe there is a lot of we can do by simply complaining about stuff. Because go back to those Brazilian players who wanted to play the game in their native language. They complained a lot. We always like consider different options of how we can do it. And like based on my experience, unless there is someone among those higher-ups who is really passionate about something, you are not going to persuade them yourself, no matter how good your reasoning is. But if people complain, and if people complain a lot, suddenly it helps. So never feel bad about complaining when there is a reason to complain. It's perfectly normal behavior. I believe if people never complained, things would just be so much worse in our world, because unless somebody says something is broken or wrong, nobody will give a damn. So yeah, this is what I wanted to say basically. Thank you a lot for coming. I hope it was at least a bit enjoyable and at least a little bit enlightening, so thank you. And if you want, there are also some ways to contact me if you have additional questions. Also, yeah, do we have time? I hope we do. Awesome, yeah. Any questions, both in Slovak and English is okay.
Otázku, len zdvihnite ruku, pribehnem s Majkom.
Raz, dva, tri. Thank you very much. Great presentation. I wanted to ask, when you said people were complaining, do you have like a hierarchy of the languages that you find the most important when you are making? Like if maybe some people might be complaining that there are no translations for the language, but it's language that you don't really care about because there aren't any people like playing in that language. That makes sense.
Sorry, could you formulate it again? I'm not sure I got it right.
Yes. Do you have hierarchy? Dobre. Do you have a hierarchy of language that you find the most important for this project?
I see. So your question is whether we consider some languages more important than others.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, look, we have sales data, right? And we can figure out like which countries actually players in which countries actually prefer our game. But it would never be like, oh, I'm going to completely disregard this language because the sales are 10x time smaller. Because you know what? Sometimes, like, for example, we do have Slovak translation because we are a Slovak studio, right? It makes sense. But like from a pure commercial point of view, it probably wasn't very important, but it was important for our image. And it covers all languages basically, because sometimes this is a way to earn lifelong fans, because people will appreciate that you put an effort when most just do not. So yeah, for example, if you want again more Slovak translations, I realize that you can just everybody basically understands Czech well enough, and everything is just in Czech, but there can be still value in it. So yeah, tell people, just be nice when you're complaining. If you are nice and you're complaining, everything is perfect.
Ski.
I wanted to ask, we know each language is very unique, and sometimes there are words that are very hard to translate between them. For example, what I kind of notice on English, they kind of took this word from French, but they do not have a word or phrase for dobrú chuť.
Ešte raz?
Dobrú chuť. When you say
chuť.
Something before eating.
Have a good appetite. It's not what people say, yeah. So this is why you use translation notes, because sometimes you can be like, I want you to make sure it makes sense to a person from who is from a different culture, even though they don't have a perfect translation here. So yeah, what we would always do in those kind of cases, because I know several languages, so I can sometimes figure out, oh, they don't have this thing in there, we should put a note. So I usually just oversee those texts we have, and when I see a potentially something problematic, we would always go over it. But in general, again, each phrase in each language has intent. And if you are translating intent instead of words, you will always score golden, because that's the most important part. Words doesn't matter, intent does.
Ďalšie otázky ešte niekto?
You said you prefer individual translators. Have you encountered any issues with them, like inserting their own agenda into the translation?
Sorry, can you speak up a bit louder? I can barely hear you.
Did you ever encounter like individual translators inserting their own agenda into translations?
So is the question that whether like individual translations contributed to like the game itself in how they translated stuff? Or did I get it right?
Yeah, or like trying to play some more liberal translations and stuff like that, because
like liberal translations are good translations, because if you are just too literal, there is not much value. This is why like Gen I will replace some translators, unfortunately, because if those are just people who are translating word by word, it is not going to work. But like I had experience, because previously, before I came to Slovakia, I worked on a game with a translator who actually contributed to the project a lot. And he was a very experienced writer. So when I would write in English, he would always like suggest stuff. He would sometimes like do it. It was actually funny, because like my native language is Russian. So he was an American who spoke both English and Russian very well. And I would write in English, and then he would translate it in my native language, and it would make perfect sense. And I would never realize, I would never come by this translation myself, because this is like one of the most important parts I wanted to highlight, that translators are writers. They are not just like interpreters, if it makes sense. Okay.
Ešte niekto nejaké otázky? Nehambite sa. Pokojne po slovensky.
So this one is not a question, but a joke. Do you know how many translators does it take to change a light bulb?
3.
It depends on the context.
Yeah, sure. Makes sense, thanks. This is a good one.
Dobre, tak nejaké otázky, alebo to zakončíme vtipom? Okay, in that case, thank you, Anton, for your talk. Thank you guys
everyone.
for coming.
Thank you.